What up guys, welcome back to the channel. I am here with my dear friend Dan, and we are going to run you through exactly how we did this garden net. Now we're here to basically answer all of your questions. Firstly, why the net is back up, how strong is it, can they bite through it, does it affect any wildlife, do the neighbors care, and of course our entire build process. What did that take us?
2.5 days.
2.5 solid days.
And one of them days was horrendous.
It took us 3 days, but we gave up after about 4 hours. Yeah. So, and at the end of the video, we are going to give you a full breakdown of where we got everything, all the supplies, and all the costs. And you won't believe what this ended up costing. We'll start from the top, answer all the questions you guys have thrown through on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and YouTube, and then we'll get straight into the build process because we did document this entire thing. Now, the first question a lot of you guys had is, why did you put the net back up? Now, we've had nets up since 2018, I believe. March 2018, we put our very first net up, and they've been living under nets all that time. And we took it down about 9 months ago when we were doing some fence renos and garden renos, and the birds were just happy and chill. They were honestly just so good. We couldn't expect it any better of them. They always stayed close, you know, they were relatively well behaved. They kind of just hung out in neighbors' roofs and fences and just had a lot of fun. And I think they flew out of sight maybe twice where we actually had to go get them, which isn't too bad for 9 months. But a few weeks ago, I did see Mikey land on our neighbor's washing line. Now, a lot of you guys know, if you do have birds, they do love washing. They love to take washing off washing lines. They love to bite holes in washing. It's just something that they are just crazy about. So we just couldn't afford that risk of having Mikey destroy all of our neighbors' washing. There is a couple more reasons as well. You know, sometimes if they are on a roof a few houses down and we have to go somewhere or do something, we have to go get them down ASAP. And you know, our birds aren't the best when it comes to recall when they're having a lot of fun. Mikey's also recently started climbing down the fence to say hi to our neighbors' dogs. He never gets too close, but he climbs down just to kind of torment them a bit, and it's not something we want to happen. And a big reason, now this may seem a bit weird, but I think too much freedom isn't good. Like, when these guys are outside, they get a solid maybe hour or so a day, maybe 2 hours at some days, but now the weather's amazing, it's summer, like today it's like 20 degrees, we kind of just want to sit out here all evening. If these birds are out, you know, 5-6 hours a day, they are eventually going to get bored. They probably will start exploring more. And random screams for, you know, 5-6 hours a day just isn't a very nice thing for your neighbors to enjoy. So we like to kind of restrict it. They do say, you know, too much freedom isn't always a good thing. We are super lucky. We live in a really nice neighborhood. Like, every one of our direct neighbors are amazing. Honestly, we're so grateful we are here. Everyone around the area loves the birds. There's actually a couple around the corner where Mikey used to go visit. They heard we were putting the net back up and they were so sad because Mikey used to visit them almost every couple of days. And they're like, please, can we organize a day for you to bring him around again? So it's just one of those things where some neighbors will miss him, but we don't know everyone. There might be people around us who aren't safe. Our bird safety is the #1 priority, so I think it's about time. You know, they've had a lot of fun for the last 9 months, but we couldn't have done this forever. I mean, there's no way we could have lived in this residential area for years and years and years with these two macaws just free forever. Now let's get into this net detail. Now, I am going to be very specific. You know, I'm going to answer questions before they get asked. And the #1 thing is, how strong is this net? I mean, this stuff here, we've got some for you, like, it's relatively strong.
It will take a lot.
Like, do you want to try and tug a war it? Yeah. Okay, so I think one little bit ripped, and
we're putting a lot of strength into that.
We're very strong men right there. It's relatively strong. Can a bird bite through it? Yes, they definitely can, if they really wanted to. If Mikey or Mia were on there, chipping away bit by bit, they could bite through it. We actually had a bird here which we were looking after when the old net was up. I think it took a bird about 20 minutes. We left them out here, we went inside. There was already a hole, so the bird just had to make it bigger and it got out. Luckily, it was a free-flighted bird, but yes, they can bite through it. So if you are thinking about setting one of these up, make sure your birds are supervised for at least the first few months. I mean, we leave our guys out here, you know, not rarely supervised, but you know, we know them pretty well. But
they're super chill, they don't really go for it.
Yeah, they tend to leave the net alone, which is really good. Where I know some birds who will go for it, they will start chewing through it. So that's one thing you're going to have to kind of find out if you are putting these up. Will your bird be destined to bite through it, or will they be relaxed? A way to have them not bite through it is obviously have more exciting things in the garden. Have perches set up everywhere. We got multiple perches in this garden now, so there's more comfortable places for them to kind of hang out, you know, in the sun, in the shade, on the house. Also toys, foraging toys are way more fun than chewing on a net. So as long as they're somewhat distracted, they shouldn't chew through this. I mean, since we've had ours up, I think a bunch of others around the country and around the world have started putting nets up in their gardens, and so far so good. I haven't heard of any terrible stories of birds chewing massive holes and escaping. But if you did want to go a little bit stronger, there is the stainless steel mesh, which you can get on eBay. I actually know someone with this mesh up. The stainless steel mesh, you can see a whole lot more. It's not as kind of clean and clear. It is stronger, and you have to run a whole lot more lines, and when it does sag, it does kind of sag permanently. It's something you guys will have to decide on your own with that. To answer the question, a lot of you guys on TikTok are like, wow, all the birds are gonna get trapped in there, all the wildlife, poor wildlife, are gonna get their feet stuck. In the 6 years we have had these nets up, not a single bird has crashed into it. As transparent as it kind of is, when it's done right, if you do this terribly, you'll be able to see it from Nam, but when it's done right, you can keep it so clean and almost invisible unless you kind of look for it. But the birds see it so clearly. I've never, ever had a wild bird fly directly into it.
You've got to think birds have got so much better eyesight than us, so they're not going to fly into it.
We once had a sparrowhawk get in through a huge gap in the net.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, because I had to get out. Yeah.
We were terrified. Got in, and then it didn't know how to get out. That was a crazy situation. So situations like that will happen if you have holes in our net. This thing here is now completely airtight.
Yeah.
Nothing is getting in and out of here now. But that sparrowhawk, luckily Dan came to our rescue that day, and he helped get it out, and it was great. Now getting into the actual nets, I'm just going to explain my little history of nets, which is kind of fun. Back in 2018, when we first put it up, we had this small garden in London, you know, one of those ones with kind of, it's square, it's got some fake grass, it does the job for what you need. And all we did was buy a net for like 30 quid. Same stuff we're using now, we just went and stapled it on to the entire fence, threw down some really thick fishing line from the top window, and just pulled it up. I think we had maybe 10 lines of fishing line pulling it up through the top window. Now this wasn't too high. The net was actually just fixed on right as you walk out, right above the door, so it wasn't crazy high, but with the fishing line that you could pull it up really high, we had enough room to do anything. You know, we'd train our birds to do recall. We had friends bring their birds around and they'd do recall in it. It was a great way to get your bird to sensitize to the outdoors, train them outside, they can get fresh air, they can get sunlight, and it worked. We didn't complain. I mean, we could even throw bird parties there. We had a bunch of really cool bird parties, and I never once looked at it being like, this is terrible. Now I look back and I'm like, wow, we've really improved from then. But it lasted 3.5 years with a total cost of about £40. And you know, it worked. We were stoked with it. You came around a few times.
Yeah, no, it was good. That was where we got our first ideas from, was your nets.
Then we moved here. Now this garden is over double the size of what we had at the old place. And I thought, you know, let's just use the same technique. Let's throw a net over, staple it to the fence, and pull the whole thing up with fishing lines. Now, that didn't work as well. That was a very long process. Dan was here through the whole thing, helping.
Weeks.
It was and months.
It was horrible.
A lot of maintenance. We had a bunch of people around, and they just started stapling the net to the fence, and
ripping it off, stapling it back.
Yeah, and then we had to throw fishing line from the front of the house to the back of the house.
Well, it wasn't very fair on the neighbours.
That was hard. We had to basically attach them to like wooden sticks and just piff them over. It was hilarious. It wasn't safe. It wasn't good. And then we'd have to kind of catch them here and tie them on. And then we're like pulling this giant net up, and it just wasn't really getting
just like
high.
pulling up in little bits. But also, it wasn't like the windows. You couldn't open the windows, so then we had to come up with other plans. So then we tried to clip it onto the gutter. What ripped the gutter down?
I know.
So it was a nightmare.
You know, eventually we got there. I mean, it looked like there was lots of, you know, like
didn't look clean.
Little pointy hats through the whole thing. It wasn't terrible. We got the height though. So with this one, you know, Dan was up on a ladder, and he was screwing in these bits of wood to the top and then trying to staple the net onto it just on a ladder, and that was scary
and unsafe.
And unsafe. It just didn't really work out too well. Eventually the net looked good. For, you know, the first couple of months it was amazing, and then the snow hit. The fishing line started snapping. It started dropping down. Reattaching fishing lines to a net that is already very high is almost impossible. So we're trying to
hole.
By the end of it, it still worked, but it didn't look nice at all. It wasn't clean, it wasn't tidy. You could clearly see there was a giant net in the garden. When we came around to renovating the garden, you and Phoebe came around to help rip it down? You've been involved in the net process?
Pretty much the whole way through. We
just
ripped it all down.
So Dan came to rip it down. That was a very fun day.
Yeah,
Mikey was just staring, being like, what is going on? This is the best day ever. It's better than Christmas.
When the fence journey started.
Yeah, so we took it down to build the fence, and then
spent a week.
We spent a solid week putting this whole fence together. You know, I've always wanted a nice Venetian fence. It's just it works. It's great. It's and then we were going to put the net back up, but literally like 2 weeks before we got married, we were buying this house, and 2 weeks later, I think we had a baby or something crazy like that. There was a lot happening at once, and we just were too busy. We just didn't have the time. And the birds were fine. They were well behaved, and we're like, whatever.
But you pre-planned it because they got posts put in the garden at 4 meters?
Oh yes,
and then we cut down to 3 meters.
So those posts we put in. So when we had the garden done, the landscapers come, lay the patio, level out the lawn and stuff, and I'm like, can you throw these posts in? And we had those put in to plan to run lines between them, because we figured next net we do, we're not just going to pull it up with fishing lines, we're going to properly run a nice frame with lines, and it'll be better. So we had those put in, and then we wrapped them in, fake leaves, so kind of make them look like trees. They might look like trees, they might not. we'll do them better. So that was all done, and then summer comes around, we want to spend more and more time outside, and we were like...
One night we were sitting there, weren't we, having a few drinks, catching up, and then
we thought...
pen and paper come out, and then we started designing.
Let's put the net back up. I think when Mikey landed on that washing line, that was if he can do this once, he can do it again. And it's just one of those things where
neighbours are not going to be happy with that.
And like I said earlier, we can't get away with this for years and years and years. I was planning to actually pay someone. Like, I know people who have paid for this. It's cost them what, 1,400? I think.
Yeah, $2,000.
Yeah, $2,000. I think someone got quoted around $3,000. So yeah, me and Dan are there. We're having a couple of beersies. We're writing down plans on paper on our phones. We're like thinking, how can we do this? Our ultimate goal was to make it so clean, so tidy, so high, and just really, really good looking, because we just spent, a lot of money on this garden, from before when we moved in to after.
Stunning.
Yeah, big transformation, because we like to spend a lot of time outside, we like to entertain, we have people over, and it was something we wanted to do. So we didn't want to put a big net over it that was going to look ugly. Yeah, we didn't want to ruin the aesthetic of it. Just like our lounge, we had the floating perches because it looked aesthetically pleasing. Even here, we've changed the perches we've put up now to ones that look cooler, because why live in a shithole with birds when you can live in something that looks
clean and tidy?
Nice with birds. Yeah. So that was our main goal. The one thing Dan said, he's like, I would love to help you and we can make this amazing, but I'm not getting up on that ladder again. Get a scarf, didn't you?
Yep.
You didn't want to get on a ladder, did you?
No.
It was hard. It was hard.
One person, because you don't like ladders, so
I'm terrified of heights.
So we got the scaffolding, and the costs of that was so cheap.
Yeah.
You'll find out at the end how much everything.
You'll find out at the end. It's a good way to keep you guys hooked. Don't just skip to the end to find the costs.
No.
We blocked out 3 days. So we firstly built the scaff, and that was
fun.
That was fun. And day one, it was pissing down at rain. I think it was like 10 or 11 degrees. Yeah. But when you got to get something done, you just get it done. So we were very high.
Very high. It was a bit touch and go, wasn't it?
It's a little bit scary, but
safe.
The things we do for the birds, I guess. And it's pissing down at rain. Our first mission, because we realized from last time, putting a piece of wood up and then trying to staple the net onto it is just such a mission.
It's stapling
and stapling and stapling, and then you got net all over you, and it just wasn't going to work. So we had a plan where we screwed 2 bits of this fencing wood we had together. You don't have to use this fencing wood, just a decent chunk of wood. Make sure it's waterproof and treated. We used the fencing wood and we just screwed 2 together, and that was firstly screwed on to the top of the house.
Right under the guttering. So
right under the guttering.
The fascia boards, it's this couple mil away from there, so there's still an air gap.
As high as you can go. So Dan was the man with all the fancy tools. So he was there screwing these massive holes in, throwing in the roll plugs. And we were bolting this really sturdy, treated piece of wood from one end to another. I think we had 2 bits, didn't we? We had one 4.2 and one 2.6, making up the length of the house. So we firstly put that on. So that was the solid base which we could just screw the net onto once we had the net onto wood, which we'll get to soon. What was next? Running the lines, wasn't it?
So running the lines.
So we went with 2 mil stainless steel rope this time. We still had fishing line. I still wanted to do fishing line and pull it up. That was still my plan, as well as the wire, but Dan just every time I said fishing line, he just wanted to kind of run away and think, no.
I knew we could do this, especially when I saw the first line going. I knew we could do this without putting things over the house and fishing lines.
Here's a big mistake. Always buy the right tools for the job. I decided to not buy a crimping tool. I thought you can crimp these, what are they called? Fennels?
Yes.
There's a name for these little silver things that hold the stainless steel wire together. And there's apparently a special tool that you use to actually lock them shut, which I thought pliers would do the job. So the first thing we did was basically get hooks in the corner of the house as high as we could get, make sure they're solid in there, and then run that cable down to that very first post that we had. We're using eye hooks on both ends and turnbuckles. Dan, do you want to explain what a turnbuckle does?
First of all, we want to point out is that everything we used was stainless steel.
Yes, of course.
That's so important.
Don't use zinc plated, don't use galvanized. You want to make sure everything's bird safe.
Spend the money. And it wasn't that too much expensive. It really isn't. So basically this turnbuckle is literally hook one end, hook the other. So we crimp the things onto here, this hooks onto the other one. But as you can see in the middle, when you turn it, when it's in there, it literally tightens or loosens as you go. And it honestly made such a difference, didn't it?
It was. I didn't think they'd be that good. When you start tightening them, it literally turned it into such a solid line.
And if you have both ends, I'll say that's a good 40 mil each, maybe 80 mil.
No, of course,
you have this much tension on the line that you can pull in, and you're never gonna lose that much tension in the cable.
It was good. So we ran the first line, ran the second line. This was just a process where we're drilling a tiny hole inside the post, putting in a eye hook and buckle on each end, stainless steel wire in the middle, crimping it together with pliers, which again wasn't the best idea.
No.
But you know, it worked, and then tightening them. Yeah, so by the time all the lines were done, well, all apart from one I think it was, we still had to run that last line, but it was just pissing down.
We were drenched.
We'd gone through I think 2 layers of clothes each. It was cold, and I think we just thought,
enough's enough.
We'd done 4 solid hours that day, and we just couldn't continue. Next day, glorious, glorious sun. Day 2, the sun is out, the birds are flying.
It is good in the hood.
In the hood.
Mikey!
Who lives under an apple under a tree? SpongeBob SquarePants!
Mikey, who is that?
It was beautiful. It was amazing.
The turnaround.
The birds were out with us, flying. Their very, very last fly outside. Very, very sad. I was just, little did they know. But they basically were just soaring the skies and having literally the time of their lives, and it's so beautiful just to watch them just fly around this neighborhood, and they do have fun, and they know the area so well. But again, we can't do this forever. We touched that last line. Very, very last hook went on the side of the house. We went to the side of the house because we had to go over the garden office as well. So Dan was up there screwing that in. Again, same thing, roll plug and eye hook, just so it's all nice and tight and solid. Then it was time for the net. Now, we got a 14 by 15 meter net, and the garden's only about 10 by 9.5-ish. But you need the extra because you have to think of the height and the drop it's going to come down. You also definitely don't want to buy under. You don't want to stretch the stuff too much. You want to stretch it a bit because you want it tight, but you know.
You don't want to stretch too much, it makes it look. It deforms it a bit. So
we were unraveling and unraveling and unraveling, and I remember laying this out. I think it went
from the front of the house to the back garden.
So
then we measured it because we wanted to definitely make sure. Once we knew what wave was 15 and what wave was 14, then we laid it out in the garden sideways and then folded the net both in halfway each.
So we needed to basically find the center, but we also needed that overhang to be hanging. So we needed to know exactly where the middle was so we could have the exact same overhang on either side. Once it was laid on the ground, instead of getting on a ladder like we did last time, stapling net after net, we basically just laid out
6 point something meters.
Yeah, the exact same wood, exact same material, laid it down and just rolled it. And rolled it, I think we rolled it about 5 times.
5 times.
Yeah.
And then we stapled it.
Yep, and then stapled it. And that way, all we have to do now is just screw that piece of wood into the bit of wood on the top of the roof. No messing around, nice and clean, nice and easy.
And this is where the scaffolding come in good.
Yeah.
Because you did this on the ladder, you will never
It'd be impossible. There's no way to carry that kind of length of wood or that kind of weight. Like the nets, we know with the tension.
It's heavy.
It's heavy. Getting the piece of wood up there was a bit of a challenge. I remember I was trying to manage it, couldn't. Mummy Human came out and helped. She had one end, I had another. Dan was on the scaff. We had to kind of hoist it over to him. And then I think Mummy Human put it on the cabin. Yep.
And then you come up and held.
I came up, passed it up another level. And then the moment we had it up, we were just basically holding it. The moment 2 screws are in.
Honestly, that is when the eureka moment happened. We're like,
sick.
Oh my god, this
is amazing.
This has worked really well.
And I was like, how easy was that? Like within 10 minutes.
Honestly, we had it up within 10-15 minutes.
From the ground to bolted to the very top of the house, so solid. And it was so clean this time. From there, I threw my side of the net over the line. I was like, great, let's start getting the shape. And as I did that, boom, it snapped.
What was that? Did that line just break?
Yeah.
How did that break?
Now we were like, what is going on? How did this 2mm steel wire just snap? Turns out those little I don't know what they're called. The little clamps that hold the wire together, you needed to close with a crimping tool. You couldn't just close them with pliers and strong.
Not just that. We worked out later on that day that you're supposed to have the crimping tool to crimp it, but also then have a clamp what you bolt together to then hold that.
So we reclamped it back together extra strong this time. I think you did it
strong,
shaking and just then it worked. The lines over the fence, it was amazing, and we had to kind of really spread it out before we threw it over the back lines of the house. Now, as we're doing that, we have to make sure everything's evenly spread. So Dan's on the scaffold, Mummy Human's pushing him. He's making sure everything's evenly spaced out, and he's doing this crazy little dance as the scaffold's moving. It was going to get caught in the scaffolding itself, so that was obviously quite fun and funny. From there, we could droop the net over the back, and getting it over those posts was a bit of a mission, just because we wrapped them in the fake leaves and stuff to make them look like trees, and it kept getting caught, and it kept getting caught. And it was really frustrating because there wasn't a smooth surface for it to just go over, move over. So if you are going to do this, try make your posts very, very smooth or round, or don't wrap them in artificial leaves. But eventually, the net was over the whole back of the garden, and Dan then you cable tied it all to the gutter, which was, I think, the best way to do it. We could have run a bit of wood and stapled it, but why add more to the house if you don't need to? The gutter was
super clean.
It's very, very clean. It looked really tidy. From there, we got into stapling. Once one side's fixed on, you can really get a feel what you can do with the rest. So stapling does take time because the staples are about that far apart or something like that.
Yeah, and you have to roll the thing.
You want to roll it. Yeah, you want to make sure it's a decent amount that you're actually stapling on. So you don't want to just staple one tiny bit. You want to roll it. So Dan would roll,
so it's a two-person
I'd
job,
staple, and then you'd keep moving, keep moving. You want to pull it tight, but you also don't want to pull it too tight, because if it's too tight, it's going to start pulling from the other ends. You're not going to have the tension you want. It won't look as clean, because some bits will be tighter than others. Once that's all done, you basically cut off all the slack and move on to the next side. Then, when we got into this corner, because this garden is a weird shape, and the net was square, when we were pulling the net over, it was bunching a lot. And Dan was just like, look, this is the best we can do. It's going to bunch. There's nothing we can do. And I was like, but it's so annoying. And I was like, surely we can make this better. And I thought, what if we just cut down this entire post? The net wasn't actually touching it, which was great.
But literally 2 cables.
Yeah.
We didn't.
That whole line didn't even need to happen.
2 whole cables didn't even need to be there.
Yeah, the line running from the 2nd to the 3rd post and the 3rd to the 4th post, we didn't need. Dan got out his big meaty saw, and we cut it down.
Got the reciprocating saw out and just,
it was good. And then it fell and put a big dent in the grass, which I wasn't too happy about. I'm really trying to take pride in my grass at the moment, so but what can you do?
That's when the magic happened.
And we were so stoked because without that post, it opened up so much more view. Firstly,
not just that, the pull we got on the
we could pull.
At this stage, you were still like, we're gonna have to chuck lines over. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. It doesn't need to be done.
And everything was sitting great without fishing lines. And I was like, maybe we don't need to throw fishing lines over now. I still wanted to at this stage. And Dan brought up a good point. He's like, if you throw up fishing lines, you're going to have these tent-looking things all over. Once you pull up one, it's going to pull upwards, and you're going to have a little bit more slack, and then you'll have to add more and more. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Right now, it was just getting so clean, and I could see how it was going to look at the finished product. And we just got rid of that post, so the whole garden looked so much nicer already. We just had one line going from the left of the house to one post, that post to another post, and then the final one was on the other side of the house.
To another post, what was 4 meters because it's in behind the bush.
We were lucky that the post in the bush we could get a bit higher because it was basically hidden by trees, so no neighbors could see it, so we could get away with it. That's another thing. If you are planning to do this, definitely ask your neighbors or tell your neighbors, or no, ask your neighbors.
Yeah, ask your neighbor.
If it's not done really nicely, it will look absolutely horrible, especially if you're going as high as ours. We've checked from the street and our neighbours' views, and it doesn't actually look that bad, which is nice. Yeah. Once we got rid of that post, stapling a bit more, Dan had to leave that night. He had a very busy social life. I think we were here 3 days and he was out 3 nights in a row afterwards, exhausted as ever. So day 3 kicks in, and I told Dan that I snapped another line after he left when I was trying to pull down on that right side of the garden too hard because we didn't use the right tool. So I ordered stainless steel wire rope clamps, 2mm, and they were absolutely amazing. Amazon Prime, I ordered it like 9 o'clock at night, and they were here at what? 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. Amazon Prime. You guys are amazing. Yeah. Well done. We attached them all to every line. We knew they were 100% secure. And I had already stapled most of that fence. So basically, this is one thing, if I could go back, I'd probably do again, because once the net's on, attaching a line is extremely hard and extremely tight. We had that net perfectly straight, and when the net was over it, it looked like a nice, even, straight cut. Because we put the line on after the net was stapled, it had quite a serious curve in it. It's not the worst thing, it really isn't. It still looks sweet, but without the curve, it might have been easier. Yeah, might have been nicer, but it's not too bad at all.
It doesn't look bad at all.
But yeah, once that was done, there was just that tiny bit left
on the roof.
On the roof to do. To run the wood from the top hook to the top of the office was just a piece of wood there.
Wood,
stapled it nice and easy. Keep it clean and tight. And a piece of wood on the top of the office roof, and then just wrap the net in there, wasn't it?
So I literally turned it, and where I put the bit of wood down the side, I just bolted that other bit of wood into it. It sits on the roof, it's super solid.
Now once that was done, I was like, okay, this is perfect, but could we do with a couple of lines in the middle, just
crisscross,
just in case. But I didn't want to use big, thick stainless lines, because you can see them. You can actually see them, and I wanted this to be as minimalistic as possible. I didn't want to sit in my garden and look up and see these lines crossing or whatever. So we used the thinnest but strongest fishing line we could find, which was braided. I think it was like 0.6 or 0.5 mil, and it could still hold a decent amount of weight. We ran one of them from one turnbuckle and one corner to the other, and the other way as well, and it brought the net up.
It made the net solid, so if there's wind, if there's snow, it's supported.
It kept it really tidy as well. There was no dip. And it's literally invisible. Like, you can look up and you cannot see these lines, which is perfect because the net itself is actually thicker. So if you get the same color, blends in nicely. And then, of course, we wanted to make all the
net disappear,
on that was stapled to the fence. Now we stapled to the top of the fence. A lot of fences you might not be able to do that depending on how your fence is made, but we got away with doing that. Now, to make it completely invisible and streamlined and clear and beautiful, we put a top cap on the entire fence. So we got basically a slat of wood that the fence is made out of, made it flat, and ran it the entire way across. Dan did these amazing fancy 90-degree cuts, which was extremely handy. And it covered any kind of mess on the top, because when you're rolling those net cables,
and also it also then protected that net, so there's no chance of it splitting. The staples giving up. That is literally no chance held the staples down.
Because birds like to destroy stuff. No chance of them just start ripping staples out or anything like that. So it kept it flat. It keeps it looking so clean.
So clean.
The net looks like it just appears from behind the fence now, which is amazing. It kind of just completed it, and we were so stoked on it.
Like, literally.
Yeah.
I'm shocked of how well. In my mind, it wasn't as good as what we did. And with just 3 lines, literally 3 support lines.
Yeah.
It was that easy. Obviously, we have the massive support on the back of the house with the wood, with the net wrap.
And also, if you guys are going to do it, go with black netting. Don't use white. I've seen white nets before, and they're just very, very, very visible. Also, the higher you go, if you can get away with it, the less you're going to see them. Like, we walk out here sometimes, and we don't even know there's a net up. Like, we literally do not know
you
there's
can
a net
actually
up.
see on the camera, it's hard to actually
It's hard to see. I mean, you
picture.
can see it if you're looking for it. It's not this kind of ugly...
Well, I sent it
thing.
to my family and they were like, but where's the net?
Yeah.
Like, literally, that's how invisible it looked on the
And
phone.
the fact is, now we can deck out the whole garden again with perches. Now, this is something we didn't really want to do. You know, we'd had our nice looking garden. We didn't want to cover it with broken tree branches, but we also did it again in a kind of cool way. So we kind of made them look like part of the garden, like little, you know, pieces, ornaments. The birds have a lot of different areas, a lot of different heights. Cost-wise, you wouldn't believe it.
You'd be shocked.
This entire thing, minus the posts, because we already had them, £290 for everything.
That's the scaffolding.
That's the scaffolding too.
The netting,
the netting,
the wire.
the wire clamps, both sets of wire clamps.
Yeah.
To break down where we got everything. Now, these nets, they are from a company called Elixir Gardens. So here is the exact net we bought. And I will put a link in the description as well if you guys do want to get the same. They got a huge range of different sizes. We actually got ours off eBay from Elixir Gardens. We've used them for years. The steel wire rope. Now, this kit was amazing. We got it on Amazon for like 35, 36 quid. Yeah.
It was absolutely...
And that was, I think, 50 or 60 meters of 2mm stainless steel wire with the turnbuckles, with the clamps, and the eye hooks as well.
It was
like,
all stainless.
It's basically build yourself a bird garden net. It was nuts. I couldn't believe it. The fishing line we got, I think, 6-7 pounds or something like that.
Staples.
Oh, staples, yeah.
And,
Staples. What was staples? About 6 quid for
yeah,
2 packs or something like that.
2,000 staples.
And that lasted us. You'll need a staple gun if you want to do this. And yeah, just a bunch of screws.
Like
but
six items.
yeah, it's not, you don't need a whole lot. Now, the posts at the back are extremely handy. Concreted in. In our previous garden, we had these tiny little posts. They were like literally about that wide, and they worked. They weren't as aesthetically pleasing. I mean, I'm sure you can hide them and make them look nice, but you know, we didn't have them too high either, but it does help to add a little bit more height. But like I said, in previous gardens, we haven't had posts. But if you do have a big garden, I would strongly recommend posts, or wrap it around a tree if you have a tree in your garden. You just want some height, especially if you're coming off the roof.
Also for tension, you want strong posts for tension, because them cables do hold a lot of tension when you start screwing them in. And if you've got a flimsy post, it's just going to bend it.
You don't want that. If we were including the posts in this 290 quid breakdown, I think, they were about 15 quid each, maybe a bit more. So in general, you could pay someone, you know, 1,500 to 2 grand to literally do this, which I was almost going to do until Dan came around and was like, let's do this. We saved so much, and it was a lot of fun.
It was fun, actually.
And it's such a cool achievement to be able to do this. Yeah, sit out here.
And know that we did this.
Knowing we did this, and it's so clean, and the birds seem to love it.
Actually love it.
Yeah, Mikey's loud. Anyway, so thanks for tuning in, guys. Hope you learned a bit. If you need any further info, just let us know. And we're not here for hire because we don't want to do this. No. But we're happy to help in messaging.
Buddy.
Cheers. Bye-bye.